Hi, I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health. Join us for conversations on the bleeding edge of science, health, and culture as we bring you tech innovators, thought leaders, and the movers and shakers who are transforming science fiction into your new health reality.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be back with you on Hot for Your Health, which is a podcast we have now done for over 100 episodes. So in a world where podcasts last 10 episodes, I am thrilled and honored that you repeatedly come to listen to amazing people like I have today, Joe de Sena. Now, I've come to know Joe as a neighbor, a father, an amazing husband to a good friend of mine, Courtney. But on the outside of that world, we have Joe de Sena, who first started out in finance. People have heard that story of how you created a world for yourself, starting with swimming pools, ended up on Wall Street. But in my opinion, that was all foundation for what your true calling is, and I could be wrong. But I think what I see you doing now in founding from nothing, an idea, a napkin maybe, Spartan Nation, which is an international movement, an international brand, an international business that has set the goal of changing people's lives by telling them to Spartan up. Like, we are capable of hard things. We are designed mentally and physically if we would just realize it. And so I wanted to circle back and talk with you today because you've codified it in yet another book. You have a previous book called Spartan Up, which is the principles of your work. But in this book, Extreme Balance, it really seeks to take people's psychology to the next level because, tell me if I'm wrong, I think we can make our bodies do almost anything if our brains are in charge of that, but not if our brains are behind our bodies.
Yeah, thanks for having me, by the way. I never thought of it, but as you were just speaking, I just realized, of course that has to be true, that we can make our bodies do anything, because we were just talking about my son, who's 18 and went off to college. You have a daughter, same thing, you have kids as well. And we got them to do anything we asked when we were in command. But as soon as they have to do it on their own, where their brain is in command, it short circuits, right? Like, oh, that's too hard, or that's too far, I don't feel like doing it, I'm gonna sleep in late. But when we're in command, and they don't have to think, they just have to do, they do it. And I like to say, God forbid you and I were in some horrific accident and we had to hike 50 miles over a mountain to save our family. We do it.
We would find a way.
We'd find a way. We do it. But when the obstacle is Netflix and chocolate bars and fill in the blanks, and by the way, it's acceptable to live that way. We don't do it. We don't do it, and we get softer and softer and softer. Almost the opposite of peeling away the layers of an onion. Right? We're adding layers of cushy softness, complacency.
Yeah, but what does that lead to? We're just going to dive right in. What does that cushiness lead to?
Well, we're not happy. I mean, you're a doctor, but you tell me if I'm wrong, right? We're not happy. We're probably over-medicated. We're self-medicating ourselves. We're sleeping in. We're not hard-charging, living an optimal life and feeling great. And then we're not as fun to be around, right? Because a high-energy person that's, and when you're around a high-energy person, it's fun to be around that. Because that person is squeezing everything they can out of life. But look, this morning I did my workout. I work out every day. I did not feel like doing it. I did not feel like getting in the cold water. I did not feel like, I didn't feel like doing any of it, but it's a non-negotiable.
What I see as an orthopedic surgeon, to extend on what you just said, is when we continually to accept the excuses our brains make. Listen, I think our brains at some level are designed to conserve, meaning we don't know when the next hard time's coming, so we're going to conserve energy until that time. That worked when we were living in really stressed out times with no resources. And maybe in some parts of the world, that is still necessary. But in the United States of America, where abundance is everywhere, even if we don't have a lot of money, that works in a counterproductive way, because the more I see people who come into me who have layered on the layers of comfort and I don't want to get hurt, so I don't do anything, or they're not necessarily feeling great. And And I describe it sometimes when I write, is living in the dim middle, D-I-M middle. We're not living in the brightness of being strong and courageous, and we're not truly sick, where we're expending our stressful energy there. We're just kind of gray.
Yeah, my buddy owns Saks Fifth Avenue. He calls it mayonnaise in the middle.
Really?
You're just mayonnaise in the middle,
Just,
right?
yeah.
Right, instead of going for it. And look, I get it. I get it because when times were tough, like you said, you and I would be doing this podcast pushing penicillin and couches. We need more penicillin and couches, right? But times are not like that now.
Not
We
now.
need. By the way, the only bad workout I've ever had my entire life is the one I didn't do. Right? Like, have you ever done anything hard and at the end of it said, I wish I didn't do that?
Actually, often when I start, just being authentic as I always am, I almost never want to.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. My brain is conserved enough that I never want to. But the minute I start, the minute I break a sweat, the minute I'm, the other day I demonstrated, somebody challenged me to carry 75% of my body weight as a farmer's carry. And I'm like, oh, Joe makes me do that in a Spartan, so easy peasy. And I demonstrated to the world. Once I did it, I just was carrying kettlebells down the field. I felt a little badassery, and I was so glad I was done. But going into it, I'm like, really?
There's a woman, we have to find it for this podcast. You've got a week edited in. There's a woman, probably in her 30s, and she's usually like somewhere in Asia. And she's showcasing like what life was like back then when you had to actually dye fabrics and and she's doing it all by herself.
Wow.
And so when you think about carrying 2 kettlebells for a farmer's carry, it's like, it's curated. It's in an air-conditioned building.
That's right.
There's a coach motivating you.
On a grass field.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
But you know what? I thought about that as I was doing it. I'm like, I grew up on a farm.
Right.
There was actual farmer's carries going on with these buckets of grain or I know how to bale hay. All the things, we call it farmer's carry. It's an actual lifestyle for some people.
Exactly.
But, well, I am truly, I mean, I've obviously appreciate so much of what you work on. But tell me this new book. It's Extreme Balance. You wrote it with 2 sports psychologists. What is the gist of this book?
Yeah, well, let's go back. So before you write a book, you're like, I don't know if I could ever, you read books, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't write one. So Spartan Up came to be because, that's the first book we did, because I was at one of my races in Texas and a guy came up and said, you've got a cult-like following, you should write a book. Didn't know the first thing about writing a book, brought someone in to help me, right? Take my ideas and put them down on paper, and it was really awesome when reflecting on it, because when you have an audience like we have that you're asking to do hard things, they do need some kind of operating system, right? Like something.
A framework.
A framework.
Like why? What would Joe say?
Yeah. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So like, what is the science behind it? And I knew we had something. Erica Walker, who hopefully listens to this, will get a kick out of this. I knew we had something about a year into it after that book was published. I got delivered in a FedEx package in our office that book, which was 3 times the thickness because it had obviously been in water and dried and it was like swollen. And it had Post-it notes and notes all over it. And she was asking to sign it. She was in the military.
It was like her Bible.
It was her Bible, and she was carrying it through the races and through the mud. And I said, oh my God, like we got something. And so from there, it was like, all right, we got to write more books. So typically, I always have a book that's being worked on. And this one, Extreme Balance, came about because of an MMA fighter named Ben Askren, who's top of his game in wrestling, top of his game in MMA. And he said, I've got this crazy idea, Joe. I want to write this book, and I know you've written a bunch of them, on something that's never been written about in sports psychology, which is how do you balance, we're all told by influencers, we're all told in books and movies and experts, conferences, that this is the way.
Yeah.
This is the way to be the best doctor. This is the way to be the best entrepreneur. And his argument was, well, maybe it's not one way.
Yeah.
Maybe there's this delicate balance, there's this paradox. An example would be like, we're told to crush our competition, right? Smash the opponent. But like, don't you have to respect the opponent also? But that's a tough thing to do, because if you respect too much,
Then you won't go after it.
Right, but if you go after too much and you become too possessed with it, you might not achieve your goal, right? So he posed a couple of those paradoxes to me. I brought in a sports psychologist to help us write it, and it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I mean, it's a really good book, and people are loving it. It's sold out on Amazon.
Yeah.
And
it was the #1 book in sports psychology.
yeah. There's definitely something there. So, and it's a quick read. What's
different, because in the highlights of the book, it talks about if you're a reader, I mean, and you read this category of books, sometimes it becomes pretty repetitive. If you're reading those books, you know that most of them are telling you to live in the moment, don't self-talk about the past. Right. But extreme balance is different.
Yeah, well, and the idea is it's challenging you, the reader, you, the person going after whatever you're going after in life, to consider both sides. There's you met Kyle Dake, I think, right? Kyle, one of the best wrestlers ever. Kyle, had this opponent, Jordan Burroughs, and Kyle didn't make the Olympic team once, and then he didn't make the Olympic team twice because, imagine, 4-year cycles, trained for 4 years.
8 years later.
8 years later, didn't make it. And I was at the Olympic trials on the 3rd attempt, and he won.
Yes.
And in the final moment, he sat down, leaned over, talked to Jordan Burroughs. No one could hear in the crowd because the crowd was so noisy.
He had just wrestled Jordan Burroughs.
Just beat him.
And beat him.
Beat him. Third time, right?
Time.
12 years in, 11 years, whatever it was. And I asked Kyle later that night, I said, what'd you say? And he said, I told him he made me a better wrestler. So he wanted to kill him.
Yes.
He ruined Kyle's life for 8 years, right?
Yes.
Well, 12 years. But if he didn't have that,
what would have pushed him? And I just saw there's a documentary on WWE. I'm not a fan at all of the fake wrestling. The choreographed.
The choreographed stuff, and I've always kind of watched. We all have watched it from the side, seen some news headlines or whatever. But I didn't really know the story, and I was listening to the story. Same thing. He had a competitor that was tough as hell. We had Tough Mudder.
Yeah.
Tough Mudder drove us crazy, and I remember doing interviews. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to put him out of business. They drove me crazy, but at the same time, when I did interviews, I would say, they're a really strong competitor.
They're a worthy opponent.
Yeah, they're really smart.
Yes.
And so I was respecting them, but I wanted to kill them. So not a lot of sports psychologists, not a lot of books, not a lot of folks talk about that balance, and it's a tough balance. Another example would be, you've got to be extremely detail-oriented and organized to be successful. You know this as a doctor. But at the same time, you got to be ready for anything.
You have to have put in enough reps or have a belief in yourself enough that, I mean, sometimes I do say, and it's not hyperbole at all, I have enough reps. I believe in my hands and my capacity. I can fix anything. Or if I can't fix it, I know how quickly to recruit. So it becomes that attitude, right? That there's nothing that we're not unwilling to address.
Yeah, Michael Phelps, the story goes, his coach knew he had a winner. And he knew at some point we're going to make it to the Olympic Games. And he knew Michael, practiced and was organized and had everything. But what he didn't know was what would happen in a black swan event where something went wrong, where the goggles broke.
How he could adapt.
So he started to throw monkey wrenches in Michael's program, let's lose his duffel bag but not tell him. Let's break his goggles before the event but not tell him. And sure enough, there's a moment in the actual Olympics where his goggles get to it, but he wins anyway because he had practiced it.
Yeah.
So we need to be prepared for anything. We need to practice adversity, but also be extremely diligent, organized, do the reps.
Systematically. Because we're not just, becoming a champion doesn't mean that you just are born with good protoplasm. I mean, some people are born with talent, but in my experience, and I think even my husband would say this, talent is never going to be enough. It is the hard work, it is the reps, it is the attention to detail. Tell me about this. I notice this a lot. I'm this way in the operating room, but in the champions you work with, they know all the details down to the second, right? They may seem pretty easygoing, in the OR, not everything matters. I call out everything to keep it in line. My house doesn't look like that.
Every single detail.
Every single detail.
Yep.
Do you find that in champions? Like they know
well,
everything?
it's funny. There's next to your office is Nestry.
Yes.
And for those listening or watching, Nestry, they'll put a head cap on you. They'll have you think about a few things, and they quickly map out your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Kyle. They did Kyle Dake's brain, and they didn't know Kyle at all. But I know Kyle, and I know the coaches that know Kyle. And one of the criticisms they have of Kyle, the coaches and the people that know him, is he's extremely detail oriented, like you just said, but maniacally detail oriented to the point where there's energy expenditure on details that he probably shouldn't be focused on. Like maybe there's things in the OR room where the nurse should handle that, and you should
I should turn away.
You should turn away to a couple of things because you have other things to focus on, and that's what Nestry noticed about Kyle's brain. And so I would say, again, it's a paradox, right? Because you should be extremely detail-oriented, extremely diligent, but like if you are too much, then you can't do as good a job as if you leave some of the stuff to the experts around you. It's like a manager that's a right?
A micromanager.
Yeah.
I wonder if the balance is, because I'm thinking through my own situation, I know that not every single minutia detail in the OR is my responsibility, but I notice it because I am responsible for this patient. The champion is responsible for their outcome. So if I'm gathering data all the time. Sports people do. They know the field, they read the ice, they know the obstacle that's ahead, and they're thinking ahead. I'll tell you my Spartan example of that. But I may notice what's going on, and if it's good, then I move past, not one more second of energy. But if it's not good, then I am totally going to fix that because the outcome depends on it. For me, I guess that's how I handle not expending all my energy on something
because I'm the same way. You need to trust that you're covered there.
Right, and then I move on.
Right.
So is that part of being balanced? Is being able to move on?
Look, I was lucky enough to be in with the Delta Force that doesn't exist, and they said to me, no one does anything great alone. And so like you could try to manage it all and try to be
right. That's not
it's just not possible. You need a team. And how awesome is it when you and I see the team that wins the championship or the individual, and he says or she says, it was my team.
It's my whole team.
It was my whole team. And that's nice to hear because there are other functions that need to be, and you can't do it all. I can't do it all.
I think, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think a great champion, a winner of anything, knows that they are good in this very narrow lane, and it takes this and this and this to build we call it a team that takes care of the team, if you will. But is that what you see? That they're great in this?
There's no doubt about it. And when you get the right team, you win. And how often do we see folks disassociate, like Tiger Woods, or go down the list, right? And then all of a sudden everything, because it's not just that individual, it is the team. And probably not just the expertise of each team member, but also the way they work together.
Right, I call it, you gotta be careful who you let on your bus.
Right, right, no, that's right.
One disruptor kills the whole mood.
Yeah.
So what are some other principles of extreme balance?
I guess a big one would be, if we're really focused on winning and over-focused on winning and not on the process and enjoying
the process.
Right? And so there's this balance, like, what do you mean I should be focused on winning? And like, well, if you're too focused on winning and it becomes your whole life, that's not good. That's not good either, because there is going to be a moment when you lose. And
then who are you?
Yeah, how many, my friend runs the Olympian Alumni Association. Imagine 80,000, whatever the number, just some giant number of alumni Olympians, and that was their whole, in most cases, that right? And then when that's over, now what?
Yeah, it's really hard.
It's hard.
Whether you're pros or the Olympics, once it's done.
It's done, and so what if you could balance somehow loving the process as well? I love the process more than
the end.
Yeah, I love even though it's a fight every morning like it is for you, I love the cold, I love the sweat, I love the work, and I relish in it, and maybe too much.
Yeah.
Care less about the winning.
Yeah.
right? Sisyphus. I'm more Sisyphus than I am.
Oh, the rock up the mountain.
Yeah.
You'll
Over
do the
and over and
rock
over.
all the
Yeah.
time. In
Yeah.
fact, you welcome when it slides back down.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh, we get to do it again.
I have to do it again. That's so great. Well, have you encountered, this is a little bit off topic, have you encountered in the champions or the alumni Olympians, I've encountered it with my pros and in my own husband pro in my house, sometimes when you've lived in the rarefied air of championship and that level of good stimuli, not just the accolades, but the work that you could do, what you could get out of this body, sometimes it's hard to love a process where you never feel that again. And so maybe they don't want to do it at all. Have you had champions who are like one and they're like, okay, done, did that. I don't want to, if I can't be that again, I don't want to be in the process.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's the really elegant retirees of sport that we know. Who, given an example, I think Michael Jordan retired maybe at the right time, but then I think he came back. But then there's those that go probably too long in the tooth in it. So it is a delicate balance, and so maybe the ones that stay in it too long. Tom Brady probably stayed a little too long.
A few years,
right?
maybe 3 years.
Right?
I don't know.
But maybe loved it.
Yeah.
So that's why it's called extreme balance, right? This is a really, if these were easy questions and answers, everybody would get it. But I think some of us are too far one way or too far the other way, and the ones that get it just right, they're the ones.
I love watching, because I'm a sports doctor, I love watching the process of champions. I'm so inspired by their minds, how much they're willing to push their bodies, but a lot of Spartan Nation, including myself, are mere mortals. And so I've obviously, before I ever met you or your family, knew of what you were doing, knew of Tough Mudder, blah, 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 the whole thing. And my attitude was, I'm never gonna get out there and get dirty. I'm not afraid, but just not me. But then I can't live in the same town and know you and not be affected. So I remember the first time that I decided just to enter into it. I do the stadion races because I want to be in great venues. And we came here and we filmed, and I was really excited. And I knew that I had the capacity to figure anything out, whether it was 30 burpees or figure the obstacle out. But I went in the first time, like probably a lot of your mere mortals, like, okay, I'm gonna do this, but I'm a little afraid. And the figuring it out part for me was, okay, that's an 8-foot wall. I'm only 5 feet tall. How am I gonna jump? Am I gonna wait for help? Just that process of how I'm gonna figure out something really hard. And I filmed the first one, and we were going back up the stairs for the 97,000th time in the 100-degree sun, and I filmed it and I said, the only way out of here is to go up. I can't go down. The only way to, and I made another one that day when you sent us up the ramps under ropes or something. Yeah, bear crawling up a ramp, and I just made some comments to myself like, well, I could cheat through this. I could. No one's watching. I could cheat, but I'm only cheating myself. So you have to do the work. Yeah. So those are the things that I brought out. And then after my first stadion lesson, in the scope of Spartan, it's only 3.2. It's only 20 obstacles. It's not the hardest. But there was this certain badassery that came from having done hard things. And then I've brought two groups of really mere mortal women. They're midlife women. They stop believing they can do hard things. I brought a group to Boston. We did another group in May in Tampa. You were gracious to host us. To a woman. They go in scared and they come out badasses. Is that what you find?
Well, as you're talking, I was just thinking, I wonder, like the Kardashians had reached out to us 4 or 5 years ago, and they wanted to do a race. And normally you would think, I don't know the Kardashians, but you would think that somebody would call them and say, we'll offer you money. They were calling us. And then, Prince Harry and James Corden and go down the list, Lance Armstrong, Gerard Butler. And so why do these super brands that have everything, I think they need a little badassery. I think that's the reason they seek it, right? I think they need to be a little scared.
Yeah.
They're being pampered and And us in our own ways, we're being right. Everything in our life is organized. Like when you said, I had to figure out the 8-foot wall. Like there's not a lot of things you have to figure out on a daily basis anymore. You know how to do it. Mm-hmm. You opened your office. You do your operations. Mm-hmm. You have your team. Like, right?
Yeah,
there's no disruptions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Maybe whatever. So I think as much as it sucks to have to figure it out and be scared and have that self-talk, it's also nice.
Oh, it doesn't. It sucks. Okay. I'm not going to paint it with rosy glasses. Sometimes it sucks, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually okay.
There was a famous Stoic philosopher, Seneca, that advised Nero. He was, I'm led to believe he was the wealthiest man in the world. He was Elon Musk of his time. And once a month, he would go live in the streets like a bum.
Oh,
he wanted to like level set, and he wanted to feel it. And that's a great word. He wanted to feel it.
Yeah.
Do we really feel when like every day is so easy?
Yeah.
Right?
You know what? That's amazing, because that's exactly what doing hard things does. It makes me feel
alive.
Yeah.
Right?
Because sometimes, I mean, literally, it's easy.
You're just sleepwalking through life. We're sleepwalking through life. Like.
And it doesn't have anything to do with money, actually, because people may be listening. They're like, you two successful people talking about easy life. Well, I have been very poor in my life.
Yeah.
And you still get in the routines of you know what to do next and blah, blah, blah. This is different.
Yeah.
Putting yourself in situations that you got to figure it out, 8-foot wall, 30-foot cargo net thing.
And feel it.
And feel what it takes to figure it out or burpee it out, whatever it takes. That Spartan, if you don't make an obstacle, you have to penalize with some burpees, which nobody loves. But I was telling you before we started talking about my last Spartan race, because now that I'm so ridiculous. I've done 3, and I'm some kind of pro now.
She doesn't know it, by the way. She signed up with all of you for World's Toughest Mudder, and we're going to have her out there. I'm not sure the exact date. I'll get you the date. But
That's so funny.
It's
my next goal. So, I talk like I'm some kind of like only 3, but whatever. So I'm in my last one, and it's a big deal for me to have built up the upper body strength to be able to swing across these rings, because like most women in midlife, we don't have strong upper bodies. So I had worked at it, and I was strong enough. And in the last Spartan, I did it. So in this one that in May in Tampa, where it literally is like 105 on the infield, and we're all sweaty, this is what happened. So I'm climbing up to the box, because I'm short to reach it. I climb up there. I've got my one arm up there going, and I've got a great grip. And I had the memory and confidence of having been successful. So I just took a flying leap. I just didn't go and try to reach. I took a flying leap, and I'm halfway in the air. I have footage. It's 8 foot in the air. I grab, and it was sweaty, and I lost my grip. And I wish I had slow motion, because I'm flying through the air. I land like a starfish on my hip, and I let out a little yelp. And I thought, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm like, wonder what I just broke. I didn't break anything. It was fine. But I got up. And in that moment, I realized 2 things. Oh shit, that hurt a little bit. And oh shit, I got to burpee out now. But everybody around me, and you were gracious, there was a documentary being filmed about midlife women doing hard things, which is coming out next year, featuring Spartan races in episode 4. But everybody around me, thankfully, was very concerned that I had been seriously hurt, and did I want to quit? And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, what? Do I want to quit? Well, it hurts. I landed on 8 foot on my hip, but I'm walking. I got to go do 30 burpees. But I could have quit. That would have been an excuse. In a soft life, that would have been a reason I fell off the rings.
I think in this world we live in, I mean, think about what quitting was 1,000 years ago. It might have been death.
Dead.
Right?
Dead.
Quitting today is so easy, which makes it so awesome when you don't. Because like at the end of a lot of races now, I had this thing called the extra mile. And so you come across the finish line, you got your banana, you got your medal, you can go home. Or Nobody's watching. You do an extra mile.
Really?
And like, nobody wants to do an extra mile.
Yeah.
It doesn't even count. There's no extra mile. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
But the special people, right?
We'll just keep going.
I got to go do it. I got to get it done.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see that internal conflict going on, which is what you had when you landed on your hip. No, you got to do more of it. We got to get people, look, in this soft world we live in, we should all feel like an Olympian once a month, once a quarter,
I think if I would have quit, because I'm walking off, I'm limping off, I'm doing my burpees. Number one, I wasn't going to quit because I'm not going to quit. Number two, I'm not quitting because I know you were on the field somewhere and I'd have to admit to you that I quit. But I think that quitting, unless sometimes there are valid reasons. We talked about this. You feel like a shithead afterwards.
Yeah.
You get through the moment, you go home, stop justifying what you just quit.
I had hurt my knee in a race years ago, and I wasn't smart enough to know, was it like permanently injured? It was my IT band, so it actually wasn't that bad of a deal.
Life-changing injury.
Wasn't life-changing.
It hurt.
Yeah, it hurt. And as each hour went by in this race, and there were probably 3 days left for us to finish it, as each hour went by, I felt more and more pain, not only from my IT band, but also because I was in the race. And so my mind was...
Normal race pain now is plus IT band.
Plus IT band, and my mind just kept saying, oh, you could be doing damage. You really should stop. You should get a hamburger. You should go to sleep. Your IT band will feel...
My hip needs a hamburger.
And I quit. And I went to the hotel room and I showered and I felt great.
Yeah.
And I turned on the TV and I laid on the bed, but I couldn't leave for like 2 or 3 more days until the race was over. And so I just had to sit there.
And watch everybody else.
Yeah, and let the time go by. And then I found out later it was only an IT band, and I'm living with this thing forever. Fast forward, I started putting on all these events and I started having conversations with folks that want to quit, like the moment you described. And I would just say, please don't quit. I know what it feels like. You're going to regret it forever. And 9.9 times out of 10, people quit anyway. And then they send me an email 3 weeks later, say, I can't believe I quit. Can't believe you let me quit. I got to come back and do it again. I got one guy, Zach Ziegler, Muscle and Fitness, 4 attempts at the death race, has quit each time.
In Vermont.
In Vermont. He's coming back again this year for number 5. I just wrote about it last night because it's almost becoming a habit. It's like
Is there a certain, like, it's the cold river he quits in? It's the... He just needs one more obstacle to get through it.
I just never, when I first got into this, before the IT band one I just described, I didn't even know that was an option. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I grew up, I guess, in a neighborhood where, like, that wasn't an option, right? I didn't have a lot of money. I was trying to get ahead. I wanted to build a business for myself. Like, there was no quitting.
Yeah. And I think that's the application, because some people listening here would be like, yeah, but I'm not an athlete. I'm never going to do that. But this is not just about walls or sandbags. This is about business and life. And so talk about that. And then also, you've had many businesses. Talk about the wisdom of pivoting, because grit is the kind of resilience where you just keep banging your head into the wall but don't think through the hardiness of getting around the wall. So talk about those two things. Like when do you know it's time to pivot, and the application into business? And
yeah, well, first thing you said is, like, this is much more than a race.
Yeah.
This is life-changing for most people. What we hear at the finish line is, I'm back with my husband, I'm back with my wife, I lost 200 pounds, I gave up drugs, I gave up drinking, I didn't kill myself. And I say to myself, at least in the early days, how could it be that some barbed wire and an 8-foot wall contributed to all those statements? But the reality is, when we're living in the middle, like you said, right? What was the word you used? You call it
dim middle.
The dim. When you live in the dim, you're not being shaken.
Yeah.
Right? And you're not being woken up. And so we wake people up and effectuate those changes. Yeah. So it's much more than a race. As far as when to pivot in life, when do you leave that man or leave that woman or give up drink? I've thought about this for a long time.
There's wisdom
a long time. And I guess the conclusion I've come to is it depends on what your goal in life is. My goal in life now is to change 100 million lives. Like that's my goal. I just want to change lives. I don't care about profitability. I don't care about anything. I just want to, I get fed by people telling me these amazing stories. Now, if your goal in life was, or let's say you and I are climbing Mount Everest, and your goal in life is to be the greatest mom ever, my goal in life is to set the world record in climbing. And we're 100 meters, we're 100 feet from the top of Everest. It's past the window, it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon. We should have turned around by noon, but we could taste it. It's just 100 feet away. You want to be the greatest mom ever. I want to be the greatest climber ever. This is my chance. Bad weather's rolling in, a little risky. You probably turn around, you pivot. Because you're not looking to set a world record here.
Right.
You want to live.
I want to survive.
You want to survive. Getting down is mandatory. For me, I might go for it. Another great analogy in that same vein is Kyle Dake. He's in Tokyo Olympics. He absolutely believes in holistic health in a really good way. He bangs his toe 2 days before the Olympics. And what do they call it, turf toe?
Oh, he had turf toe.
He had turf toe.
Hurts.
It hurts. And he's got the biggest game of his life. He finally made it into the Olympics.
He did, 8 years later.
8 years, 12 years
12
later,
years
right?
later.
He's in. He's got turf toe. And his option is he can get the injection. But if he gets the injection, that doesn't jive with the way he lived.
Yeah.
Like it might create a foggy brain. It's and so first match he doesn't get it. Loses the match.
Oh, because he can't push off.
Then he gets it. Wins the remaining matches. And I guess my point would be, you can believe in that holistic health, but this is the fucking Olympics.
Right. You've worked your whole life for this.
Right.
And what's your goal?
One last one is the woman, don't know her name, it might have been like 16 years ago. She's a biathlete. You gotta watch this video, I'm getting chills about to tell you. She falls in her like practice run on her skis a few hours before the first run. And it hurts her hip, hurts her chest, and coach says, "You're out." She says, I'm not out. I'm not out. I've trained 18 years to get here. Like, I'm not out. And she, all right, fine, you're in, but we'll see if you even qualify, because I think there's 2 qualifying rounds. She barely makes it. They say, we got to rush you to the hospital. No. Barely makes the next one. We got to rush you to the hospital. No. Goes into the finals, gets bronze. They rush her to the hospital.
She has
2 broken ribs and 1 punctured lung.
Oh my gosh. That's unbelievable.
And when they interview her, she's like, this was my whole life. There is no way
I'm not going
to go for it. So she could have pivoted.
Yeah.
She could have pivoted, right? If her goal was different than getting that medal. So you gotta have an index card, I think, in your wallet, in your purse, that reminds you at that moment what your purpose is, what your why is, because in the moments where the going gets tough, we forget. And our brain is begging us to quit.
It's pivoting to survival. It is. The brain's job is to keep us alive.
Keep us alive.
Makes sense.
My brain's job is to torture people.
Well, people would say that if they watch you for 10 seconds on the internet.
And my family.
Well, you know what? But it comes with having a successful family. Look at your children.
They're good people.
They're good people.
They're good
I would
people.
agree. And it doesn't hurt to have an amazing wife to hold us all together.
Most of them talk to me still.
Well, it only gets better as they age, honestly, as they age
I'm
out of
hoping.
teenageship. Well, I've loved talking today about Spartan Nation. Thank you for changing my life and putting a little badassery back in. Yep. And my daughter's life, she's been to kids' death camp twice.
Yep.
Yeah, I asked her this summer, are you going back? She's like, yeah, I've done it twice. Why not? So she's
trying to get the trifecta.
Is that what she's doing?
Yeah, tell her this year it's 6 weeks.
Oh.
Just to test it.
Just to see what she wants to
see
do.
what her response is.
Yeah. So Joe de Sena, entrepreneur, author, visionary, my neighbor and friend, and he has a new book called Extreme Balance. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Dr. Vonda Wright. See you next week.